Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and how you got into costume design?
How I got it, and if you hear a little strange tapping, it's my dog chewing her nails. How about that?
That's
How
so
gross
cute.
is that? She's got allergies, and I'm like, okay, well,
Aw,
stop her, Suki. So how I got into costume design was vis-a-vis, I'm going to say music videos, because that was the kind of bridge or the chain that connected me from the fashion world to the film world. And it was either 89 or 90. I can't remember. I was in New York City and I was working for, now I always get confused about when I was freelance and when I was working, full time for Elle magazine as an editor, but I did both. And I started branching away into the world of film. Oh, sorry, via uh, Japanese and Chinese film, indie film, right? They hired me not because I could speak either language, although Japanese was my first language as a baby. It's because I look the part. How crazy is that? So I get it because Asians can be quite shy and very group oriented. And I think I could go off and find things in New York City and I could come back and be a part of the group. And oddly, and I think it's because of my no learning Japanese as a first language, I didn't realize that I could speak other languages so well, like especially after a week or two, So my first jobs were in Japanese and Chinese action films and Japanese TV and indie film. Milcho Manchevsky, who is a brilliant Macedonian director, still working. He's also taught at NYU. He is an old friend. He gave me my first, I would say, international film. He gave me my first job called Dust, D-U-S-T, with Joseph Fine and David Wenham. And it was my first kind of large epic film with him. And that was great because he was very demanding, wanted art in the frame. That's where he's coming from still to this day. And that's how I got started, I guess. Yeah, in the world. And Don Kurt is the first person to give me my first union gig in New York City on a TV show called Swift Justice. And we're still dear friends to this day, which is incredible. I mean, I'm friends with a lot of those folks to this day, but certainly Don Kurt is a very, very dear friend.
Well, okay. So do you want to chat a little bit about your new show? This is
Let's do it.
exciting. The
Let's do it.
Changeling. By
I
the way,
love
I downloaded the ebook version of it. I'm reading it. So it's kind of fun. I'm reading it because I was kind of like, I can't wait to find out what's happened. So I have to read it.
it's a
Um,
very, very good book. And I won't say anything
mhm.
further because I want you to enjoy it. But it
Thank
really,
you.
that Victor LaValle, he knows what he's
Mhm.
doing. It's
Yeah,
brilliant.
and I didn't realize he was the one who did the voiceover, the
Oh,
author.
yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize that until I went and looked at the credits. So that was a bit of a surprise.
It's quite soothing. I really love that guy, and he was nothing but open and helpful and a beautiful guide, through the novel, through his own life. You know, was a gentle presence and a gentle, open presence as an artist on set. I mean, that's something he birthed, and he still remained in a very sort of collaborative mental state every day, all day on set. I mean, who does that? So I love that guy a lot, a lot.
Well, I watch Apple TV, so when I saw the preview for it, I thought the Changeling, they're making a remake of the George C. Scott movie.
No,
Do you know that
I
one?
know. I guess it's quite bold to use that same title
Yeah.
because everyone asks, like, is it the Angelina Jolie thing again? I'm like, why would we do that? And George C. Scott? No, it's its own entity and it's its own novel, and it's from the book, so we should call it that.
Mhm.
I have
Exactly.
I've started calling myself the changeling in my family. My
Well,
mother is on a cruise with my little brother. I mean, Asian family, like my eldest brother is like the favorite, and I'm the middle, the only girl. My little brother is like, you know, God's golden child to my
well,
mom. So I was
I
like, I think I'm called the
We'll
change.
we'll get into what the changeling means because it means after because I didn't even know. Even though I think there was something about it in Outlander. I recall there was something
Oh,
about a
really?
changeling child. I believe that they leave for the fairies. So I have to look that up again.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that the other day. So, but now, how did you get involved in the changeling? Like, was it people you knew,
I
or how
no.
did you answer the call on this?
No, I don't think there was anybody that knew me. I know that it was the golden age of film and TV when there were projects aplenty, okay? Because I just remember it was chilly and my family was here and they're never here. And I was like, I can finally spend time with you. And then I couldn't because, I mean, I've told this story. Maybe I'm not boasting. I'm just saying, like, look at the difference between then and now. And I had 7 projects to read and prep. And the way that I prep or the way that I have an interview is to make a little mini film. So you can imagine it was a lot of time. So I sent my family away, and there were many, many different things, all very different storylines. But the Changeling, I guess one of the directors who is my friend, and I don't want to say it because I didn't do that project, was like, oh my God, you're going to do mine, right? Because Patrick Chu from Annapurna said that you're going to interview for The Changeling, which is his project. Of course, he asked me about you. And so that was weird, but Patrick Chu is another half Asian. So I was kind of excited. Very smart guy, very open also to creatives like me. I came to it because the novel is so good. The script from Kelly Marcel is so brilliant. And out of everybody I met, David Knoller, I will say this, David Knoller, one of our executive producers, was like, hey, I've been trying to work with you for a very long time. And you've been busy. It never happened. So I'd really love it if you could do that. And who doesn't want to hear that? I mean, that's like really lovely to hear anytime, So I was like, wow, okay, that sounds like good people. And then Kelly Marcel, sort of dangled a little interesting thing in front of me because it was already a golden script. I already had ideas, but she said, hey, there is something coming up in the future where you can build a whole world of women on an island. And I know that you can do that. I mean, I've watched you do it on The Handmaid's Tale. And I was like, okay, cool. If there's something that I can do that's different or unusual or a kind of task for myself to make happen, I'm always up for a challenge, and I always want to do something different. And then I met Melina on that call as well. And she was so modern and free and wanting something new, as a story to tell. And so really it was the perfect storm. It was the perfect storm. And then I think out of all the projects that I got, all of which were amazing, by the way, I mean, luckily, I love things that are well written. So I would say more than half were well written, but something about The Changeling, I think it was I'm not I'm not the kind of designer who says, oh, I have to do period. Like that's really close to my heart, or I have to do sci-fi, or I have to do contemporary. Really, The Changeling had everything. If you look at it, it's one of those stories that is based in the real, in the now, in a group of people that aren't readily shown to the world all the time. Black leads and Black history and parts of Manhattan that have never been shown, like Fort Washington, for example. And that mixed community. And someone, I'm biracial. I really want to see those stories told on the air. And so there was a part of that. Also, because the largesse of the time frames, I mean, in our story, we ended up settling on 18 something, but we were even looking at the novel is different. I think it's 17 something. So that time frame, whether it was 1700s or 1800s, all the way to 2010, I was like, that's a lot of work. And I'm always picking things where I'm slightly afraid, because I think it's the healthy way to do a job, so that you always stay fresh. And I think it was the biggest, most world-building job. And it touched on my fashion world. It touched on me being in this package, moving to New York City in 85, and it just had all those things. It had the magical realism. It had the fantasy. It had the horror and the fairy tale. Who doesn't want to tell a fairy tale? So it was really all those things combined.
So I know you said you read the book.
Yeah.
And you read the script, obviously. So what kind of, I mean, it must have been massive. What kind of research did you do on this? Is this a crazy question to ask?
No questions are crazy. They're just
Okay.
what you know. It was massive. It was massive. And so what I tried to do, because we when things come out, it's always a year afterward or sometimes later, and it's hard to keep all of that, all the details. Really, it's the details in your brain as to not just like pure facts, what inspired me, but the why. Why was I inspired at that time in my life, even, And so I decided to do. I'm sorry. Can you hear that craziness from my dog? Okay, good. I decided.
Is it a girl or a boy?
Girl named Suki.
Oh,
And she's
Suki. I saw her running back. I saw her running behind you at one point and then came back. Is she sitting at your feet?
no, she's 2 years old. She's close.
Oh, so cute.
We just spent like all this time at the vet, and she has terrible allergies. I'm just like letting her be, but it's so loud. Sorry.
No, it's not loud for me. No worries.
Okay. So what I did differently this time, after all these years, 35 years, I never sort of remember to get organized for moments like this, like afterward. And so what I did that's different this time was, I know that I have a terrible short-term memory. However, I don't let go of anything until after press and after the show's out. And so I made those little videos on my Instagram, 1 through 12, I think, like part 1 through 12, to show the process, because I had kept all those images, whether it was fittings, even imagery that I sent in to Melina, Kelly, and David for the first interview. After only having read the novel, Victor was not there at that call, having read the novel and having read maybe the first 2 episodes, to get the job, like that was really a good practice, because you're right. There's so much, and there's so much pending episode. There's so much pending what I want to focus on, because really it's every lead character in every episode, and so many different periods, like so many different moments that their ancestors, whether they were Norwegian or Ugandan, entering into the story. And so it really is like a like crazy juggle. And usually it's so boring, but I kind of do work the same way every time, which is to create images all around me. And really, the truth is, it's because of that short-term memory. As long as I have the images laid out in front of me, it's always linearly via story and via script. Then I can be like, oh yes, so young Lillian comes and works at the modeling agency in 62. I mean, I probably had that wrong. And Brian comes to see her, and she's inspired by Diane Carroll and Diana Ross, but also her Ugandan roots, because she's young. Now, I have been that girl, only half Okinawan in Manhattan in 85, trying to like throw away everything about myself, right? Maybe you have too. I don't know if you're from Toronto, but it's, oh yes, because your family's from the beach. But it's like, there's so many different things that inform costume choices. Sometimes it's really just a color or a mood or a part of a ghostly presence that's actually way back here. It's not even peripheral. It's like half peripheral, half memory based. And it might even be my own ghost. It might even be my own ancestral stuff. It's all tightly woven together. And I don't really think that's ego. I think it's just as individuals and artists, we cull from our own life to inform our experience, the creative one, the real one. Does that sound nuts?
No, I actually love it. I love, so you had like, I think I saw this on your Instagram. So you had like, mood boards too. Like did you do mood boards? Lots of visuals. And then I even saw that you have all of your, and you do this on Instagram a lot, even for yourself. You'll say homework, or you post that. I see that you do that. So you if you see an image you really like, you grab it, right? You just sort of, because I'm going to use that for later.
Yeah, it's often stuff from my own life that I'm not really sure why. And I attend the Church of Rick Rubin. I'm not going to lie, because creatively, that man is one of the best teachers. And I say that so that everybody will give him a listen. But I honestly really believe that 50% of what we create is not ours. It's not ours. It comes from on high, the ancestors, nature, political things that are happening in our world, emotions, psychology, 50% is us, maybe less. And the rest is whatever we're supposed to create at that given moment. And so, yeah, sometimes I'm taking a picture of like a brilliant crimson sky with yellow leaves, and I'm not sure why, but it's going to end up in the frame always. And it's hard to explain that to people that have hired you for this time frame, between February and October. And you're like, well, actually, yes, 20 years ago, I was driving across Sedona and I took this picture and I want to use it for Clark, for Emma. And they're like, okay. And they either trust you or they don't, because sometimes it's hard to have. I think, I used to be very embarrassed to call myself an artist until I realized I could sound really crazy to someone. Sometimes I can't find the verbiage because I think visually and verbally, but, at a production meeting at 7 a.m. on Monday when there's money involved.
Yeah.
But I think if you've worked with me, you realize like, okay, we'll give her an inch because we know this is going to translate into something. And it's never stupid. Like, I've done my homework. It's not like I'm like, everybody must be in pink. Never.
Well, I remember you had a picture and I saw you post it somewhere, and I think it was a maple leaf, or maybe it was maple key. Oh. And then you had it against, I believe like a teal blue background, and that ended up sort of being your palette for The Handmaid's Tale.
The Handmaid's Tale,
yeah. So that and it's funny too, because like teal and orange are now really super hot in in marketing and advertising, everything right now, right?
Nothing's an accident, girl. It's like, does it come from fashion? Does it come from past films? Does it come from? You better stop choking. the trick is, I think she has carbon monoxide poisoning. I think we both did. And so so she's coughing all the time.
Oh my
Now,
gosh, poor little
sorry
thing.
that I'm just letting her during this interview, but it's been like a troublesome 3 days for both of us. So, nothing is 100% ours. It could have been from a painting from the 1700s or before. It could be from a dream. And I really believe that it'll show up at the right time.
Yeah. Oh, sweetheart. Oh,
She is a hound and a Gemini, so she talks all the time. So don't feel
so cute.
all right. I'm back.
Well, I wanted to start just digging in a little bit onto the characters. Oh yeah, this is what I was going to ask you. So there are multiple timelines. You sort of addressed that, and which is really crazy. So what was your approach to tackling the different eras? Like for instance, and actually I had originally my question that Apollo, he's played by 3 actors, but he's actually played by 4. I mean, that's crazy.
Oh, I mean, even more if you count all the babies.
And the
right?
babies, exactly.
All the babies, and like I think up to age whatever, there's always 2 to 5 or 6. He's played by so many. What did you ask me? How did I approach each
Like
era?
how did you deal? Well, obviously, how did for I guess it's 2 questions. Yeah, how did you deal with the multiple timelines?
Yeah.
And did you have some kind of I mean, I know you did it visually, but did you have some kind of sophisticated software where you were able to track everything? How did you deal with that?
Do I have a fantastic crew? Each of their jobs are very, very integral to the whole. I have a brilliant American costume supervisor and a brilliant Torontonian costume supervisor, which they do have specific software that breaks everything down. And it's even when you're so brilliant and you've got the latest software, there's still questions, like in every production meeting, or to Kelly or to Victor or to every director. It's like you have to make a choice of what makes sense, because it can be a scramble visually. And so for me, I have that because we shot in 3 countries. We shot in New York, New Jersey, the US, Toronto, and Colombia for Brazil. And so, yeah, you have to stay highly organized. But really, at the end of the day, a lot of my stuff is instinctual because I've tried to work in different ways for 35 years. And when I become too rigid, I have to trust the rest of my crew to tell their side of the story that they've been hired for. But creatively, I really have to have the mainstay be instinctual and paint a certain picture, and then I fill it in to make it make sense. So there are constructs that we've all been taught, in terms of film, like the 60s. In my mind, I created my own palette for the 60s, and certainly one that is quite evident is the 70s, films that were very golden lit and warm toned, and the 80s were sort of pop colors. And that's all researched. I mean, I didn't want to just throw it out there and be like, oh, I think, again, peak for everything. Like, I definitely researched all those different eras, whether it was in film as a construct or in painting, what was popular at a certain time. And then I say, okay, all that's brilliant, and I've spent 12 hours on a weekend trying to make sense of this. And so now I have to throw all that out the window and tell the story at hand. And what clicks for me in a kind of visceral way and gut way is always the right thing. I don't know how, but again, I think it's that thing I just said about not always it being me alone painting the picture. It's everybody else, ancestors, who knows, enlightened beings helping me tell the story.
Now, one of the first things I noticed, it was on your Instagram when you had a picture
I gotta
of
be careful with
Apollo.
my
I
Instagram.
know. Sorry, I keep referring to that. And I'm
So
going to
I
put a link
swear,
below
it's
so people
real.
check it out. Yeah, they
It's
have to
real.
check your Instagram and follow you. So one of the first things I noticed is Apollo.
Oh yeah.
The very first thing is I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God, there's so many different patterns and textures and layers, and I got
Yeah.
me really, really excited. And then
Really?
also, oh yeah, and he's super stylish, obviously, as well. So and I saw that he has like lots of tweeds and different things. So and checks and textures. So do you want to tell me a little bit about that and what's
Yeah.
going on there?
Well, I have a question for you first. So you say
Sure.
he's stylish, but did you believe that he was this antiques book dealer who loved literature
Well, this
and
is a thing because as a viewer, having not read the book yet,
oh yeah.
I didn't know everything about him at the beginning. It was like a bit like an onion. So the
Right.
layers were sort of being unpeeled. And at first I was like, okay, who's this guy just hanging out at a library? Like, what's he doing here? And then, whereas in the book, it kind of explains it a bit more. So I didn't quite know what was going on. It took me a while before I figured out he was a book reseller.
Okay.
So, but he just seemed very kind of casual, but very stylish casual. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it. I don't know how you would
Okay.
describe it.
Well, I'll give you my description of where the genesis came from, which is, listen, my coming up time in New York, um, I was 21 when I moved to New York in 85 and was very interested in fashion, but also in literature, also in the arts. I mean, I happened to be going to fashion school, and maybe on the exterior, I was that person, but on the interior, I was always a big nerd who believed in Greek mythology, by the way. And so that was part of the thing that drew me to the Changeling. But, you know, I really wanted to give birth to this Apollo and Emma that were equal parts themselves in a contemporary world of 2010 when they meet, but also a symbiosis of everything that came before with their heritage. And so, on one hand, Apollo has what are the things that are indicative of those two places for real throughout all time? And I wanted it to be throughout all time because we're we, the world, the story we're telling touches down from when the ancestors came on a little sloop, from Norway in 18 whatever all the way till now. And so, but in all of my research, I wanted to tell the real story, which wasn't just Viking, but like the real ancient pre-Viking, which for some reason I can't think of. I wanted to tell that ancient story and the Ugandan story that is his mother's, right? And so I was playing around, and as you watch the whole series, season one, you'll see, and these are things that I adore, and they happen to be things in fashion every 10 years, maybe, Nordic sweaters, Icelandic sweaters, similar.
I love
Certain
Icelandic sweaters. I used to live in Winnipeg, and there's a huge Icelandic settlement there.
recently after Comic-Con watched episode 8, and while I had finished this show in October, early October, I was in LA working on a different project, which is in Vegas. It's for Aronofsky, and that's for another time. But I designed a ancient Norwegian mask, and I said to David and Kelly, like, did you guys ever use that? Because I had finished forever, but I wanted to still design for the show. And it's in episode 8. You'll see it. And it's very deep in the background, right? So I'm trying to bring it all, girl. And I'm trying to orchestrate it without missing a note. And so I guess I missed a note here or there for you. And Emma's the same. Emma is
Yeah, I was going to ask you as well. I noticed that.
Yeah, basically, Emma is my upbringing, even though my mom is Okinawan. I was brought up, I was born in South Dakota near Pine Ridge Reservation, but I was brought up for most of my life growing up, like 15 years, 3 to 18 in Kentucky. And so she's from Tennessee, Boone's Mill. So I kind of interjected this Kentucky, Tennessee bent, the kind of thing you see celebrated in the South, which is it's a kind of very individual take on style that you don't really readily see in the North or South. I mean, sorry, in like the New York, LA of it all. It's like, to me, it's so indicative of Southern people. And I see it celebrated in people like the beautiful Andre 3000, for instance, like incredible style, incredibly his own. Pharrell Williams. Okay. I'm not saying I'm one of those people, but like, I mean, I have a snake on, clearly because we're at this interview, but it's also like my thing, and it's like with really dirty farm clothes that have been like have cement all over them and chicken poop, but it's like I still got a snake on today. And it's kind of that like Southern manners, appearances matter when you're poor. You're still a lady, you're still a gent. We tell stories through our clothing, throughout all time, but certainly Southerners do it really well. And, Southerners love to tell a great fable, like that's how we talk. We talk in storytelling. And so I thought the combinations of Emma and Apollo, they're like beautiful patterns that attract each other. They find each other in that library, and they're very well read. They're drawn to books. Their apartment, their clothing, it all is speaking to that.
Well, okay, I have a couple of questions that I hope, and now this is creating a different light. One of them is, okay, so in terms of their costumes, I saw that, in your fittings and everything, you would oftentimes have Emma and Apollo in fittings just so you could kind of look at them together. But are there times where their clothing, where they're aligned, and then other times when they're opposed? Like, do you speak about that at all with their costumes?
Let's see. And the only time they're together, honey, I mean, Jared Abramson, who's also amazing, was in that fitting, and that's because of time, girl. Because nobody has time in TV, and then I'm always like, well, let's take advantage of it and photograph everyone together as well, right? So yes is the answer, the short answer to that. Sometimes I tell it through color, a draining of color, or I'm making the other person more powerful by a more saturated color. Sometimes it's the reverberation of too many patterns, dancing off their body, and their molecules are like dissipating, because it's too much energy. All of that goes into play. It's kind of the short form because I don't want you to miss out on all your
and then next, okay, so another thing is Apollo. He seems to always be, at least from what I can tell, I think there's a few times he's not, in warm tones, so like burnt oranges, browns, chocolate browns, golden colors. So what's going on there?
What's going on there is, the most base answer is, there couldn't be more beautiful colors for Black skin, right? And we're telling a fable, a story of these beautiful Black human beings. And so you want to be drawn into their light. You want to understand their very golden beginnings, from babyhood to now. And so that's part of it. Warm tones are very nostalgic. A lot of Black cinema really came into its power in the 60s and 70s. So I was drawing upon that for different reasons. But, when I think of Apollo, it's someone emotionally who wants the world to be good. He really comes through as this person who wants a beautiful woman a beautiful partner, not just a beautiful girl, but a partner to create a whole life with. And, you know, he wants to have this beautiful baby to further, you know, this wish, this fairy tale that he has. And so sometimes fairy tales are cloaked in warm tones, and they lead to very cold, scary places. So it might be a trick sometimes. It just depends on the scene, you know.
Yeah, I noticed even I think the show as the season goes on, it gets darker and darker and darker. Just looking at the stills, I was just like, wow, they're really dark in the last episode. Well, I think it's shot at night as well.
It's shot at night. I was like, why are they so dark?
Yeah.
It's always my my riff, but yeah, it's on purpose.
So I noticed Apollo wears a lot of hats. Like he wears toques and he wears like little like peaked hats and baseball caps and that type of thing. And immediately, not just like that, the color and his sort of silhouette just did give me that sort of 70s vibe. So you sort of are recalling that a little bit, but also
I forgot that they call them toques in Canada.
Toques in Canada. Did I say toque? I meant to say knit cap.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I always like call it everything depending on where I am. But you know, it's funny. I
think it's a French Canadian name for it's French Canadian, I think, for knit cap.
That is heritage. Okay, now I got it.
Yeah.
You know, so I had no hair, right, for over 10 years. And I always loved the look. Like knit caps were my kind of hair forever. Like that was my thing. But it was birthed in the street of New York. And you know, it always looks great. It always looks like there's a bit of swagger there. And for Apollo, as well as Emma, but really for Apollo, I was like really reaching for this term dark academia. And that's a fashion term, but it has its roots in all things literary and all things kind of nerdy studied, right? And so it felt right for Apollo. It also felt like something he could, it just feels vulnerable with him to me. Like I always feel like, so I either am bald or I have long hair. And in between, it's always like really close to the head because I feel much more vulnerable. And it's funny, I mean, it's a personal choice because hair is power and hair is sexual, right? And so in my mind, it just made Apollo a bit more soft and vulnerable and like could be hurt by someone. And then it started to look cool, you know, in the end.
Yeah, and I think he wears like gold rim glasses as well at some points.
It's funny. So he really wanted to Lakeith, and I
Lakeith
understand.
wanted that. Okay.
He wanted it, and it made sense for the character. Victor LaValle wears glasses. Maybe he was looking to that, but also someone who's always, you know, looking at books. Like I have Coke bottle glasses myself from always being buried so close into books. And so, yeah, I'm happy if they showed up at some point. I don't remember them being there. I think he fought for it, and maybe they gave it to him or like a part of it. It's never anyone's happy thing, hats and glasses, especially directors and DPs, because it hides the real estate of the person you're paying for, the actor, and also it can veil someone's eyes. Lakeith has no problem using his eyes, clearly, you know.
I think it was I think it was tween Apollo who might have been wearing the glasses, and then maybe the idea is that Lakeith has contacts or something. Is that what happened? Yeah. I love them though. I thought they were really great. And and it's so funny because they're really hot right now. Like I see so many young people wearing that style of glasses. Yes.
I don't know this. Okay.
Like the you know, I don't even know what they're called now, millennials. I don't know what's a below millennial called.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I wore those glasses because don't laugh, because John Lennon and the two John Denver wore them. So I wore those damn glasses.
Okay. So yeah, Mike. Okay. So so this is what I wanted to talk to you. This is my favorite question. So about the Emma's cloak. I think some people were calling it a cape, but I think it has sleeves if I saw. Yeah. And So when I first saw that, like she's wearing it in the apartment, but then there's this really cool scene where she sort of jumps off the fire escape. And the way it like floats out, I was like, oh my God, this is like a Marvel cloak, like something you would see on a
Oh,
superhero, right?
wow.
And I was like, okay, something is going on here with her character because the way it's been presented at this up to this point, she's sort of like a villain. Although maybe not to her fault because we believe that maybe she's got postpartum depression or psychosis of some kind, right? So do you want to sort of explain about the cloak to me?
Yes. So at its very center, the cloak and all coats in the show actually are very listen, everything is studied for me. I can't sleep half the time. I have narcolepsy and I can't sleep because I'm so obsessed any project I work on, and this is no different. And so to me, coats are very important in this show and in life. Why? Because they protect us from natural things like the elements. They protect us in New York on the subway. If you're homeless, you can use them in different ways, maybe as a blanket. To me, the most essential and modern garment for the future and a dystopic future, any future, is your coat. And so what I had done early on was thinking on Emma and the story that we were telling, the novel, was how to use a coat as a carapace, right? As something that is your house, literally and figuratively. And when you're passing people on the street in New York City, what do the coats say about them? Certainly Apollo says one thing. The Lillians, their coats matching and not matching say something. Brian's, Emma's. We don't really know what's happening to Emma. William Wheeler in kindergarten's coat, right? And so it really became the coat as metaphor for survival, for emotional and physical protection, for living in your house while in aggravated situations and or violent situations, whether it's just getting to your home in New York City and being pregnant, or literal and figurative demons. It became this kind of symbol for something as protection. It's kind of its own entity, each coat in the show. For Emma, I know I wanted certain movement. I always do with any costume, but for her, she goes through so much change, literal and figuratively, and we get a glimpse of a story when she's a baby, right? During a fire, her mother seemingly has lost her mind a bit, and we get a glimpse of this little child in a plaid yellow dress that sort of portends the end of her mother. And so the coat just had to tell so many stories, and the coat really came from fairy tale origins as well. It came from so many things. In my mind, as a fashion person in New York City in 85, it's like, who wears a cape? Who wears a cloak? Fashion people, musicians, Jimi Hendrix. It's like witches, real and unreal, people during Halloween. It's like homeless people wear very big coats or cloaks or capes because they can pack other things inside. And in my mind, two of the things that were always in my office, always, as very early on images, were a cloak cape as a tent in the woods, overhead in the branches as a means for protection from the elements for Emma, living under it as a real research thing. But also this kind of blue, because her coat was almost blue and green. You know, you make many different things ongoing, but I had this blue tulle that I was haunted by, to be honest with you. And I turned it into a semblance of a cloak that you may or may not have seen in those videos on Instagram, because I wanted her just to have this blue haze. And so there was a blue version of the coat, and I'm happy we went with the other thing because it's more believable. But yeah, it's, you know, costume as a magical poem.
Now, I know there's like, so for instance, Emma's cloak, like it kind of gets trashed, right? So did you have to make multiples of that? And not just that costume, but obviously many of the costumes. Did you have to do lots of duplicates?
So many, so many, so many. And, you know, that's the thing that I think people don't realize. There's so many incarnations of the one look, because most particularly on horror or sci-fi, anything and everything can happen. And that's just season one. That's just season one. So, you know, I have been that costume designer. Westworld was one of them, where I came in after a pilot and there were antique fabrics used and nothing was left. And that's a crazy place to be put in. And so I remember, listen, it's very difficult to get fabric these days, most especially quickly. It's gotten worse since the pandemic. It's gotten worse, 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 because of many things. People just aren't carrying a lot of fabric, and that's Toronto, that's New York, that's LA, that's England, Ireland, China. Okay, so it's very difficult. So in my thing with Emma's cloak, with a lot of the fabrics, but certainly Emma's cloak, because it needs so much, and it's going through water, it's going through fire, it's going in the underground. These are just season one. You know, we see her in the woods in episode 8. She's on the island for all those other episodes. I said to Kelly Marcel, I'm like, girl, please get the extra fabric that's left from, I think it was Italy. And it's also really crazy, no matter where we're shooting, when we're shooting, for some reason, we're always in the off times for many countries. I think Italy was on vacation. We were crying, trying to get everything, because we needed multiples for Clark Bacco, Toronto's own Clark Bacco, and also the stunt people, many. So I told Kelly, like, I think you guys should purchase additional fabric, because what if somebody else buys it up? You know, so I think we did in the end.
Yeah. This is so funny you're saying this, because I was just watching this. It came up on my YouTube channel. Sorry, this has nothing to do with your show, but this thing came up on my YouTube channel, and it was a round table of costume designers just sitting around at the table. And there's this one costume designer, I'm not familiar with him, but he said he just sort of has like dreams about fabric. Like, I can't get this fabric, and I obsess about it. And I go to bed at night and I'm just thinking about this fabric. And it was so funny. And everyone around the table was going, yeah. They're all like, oh yeah, I know.
It's crazy. Like, what are we gonna do? You know what I mean? And I'm someone who loves good
You need
fabric.
to buy a mill. Like, the costume designers need to get together and buy a mill, and then you can just make your own fabrics.
I've met some lovely family-owned mills in England, but here's the deal. I have learned to be not precious. A lot of those fabrics you see in the Changeling, I shouldn't even say this because it'll jinx me forever with producers who were like, you could do it for less. But you know, I know how to do it for less, because I was buying those inexpensive fabrics as a fashion student at FIT. I was buying those inexpensive fabrics from jobbers while working in the fashion industry in New York. It's like, I know how to do it. Is it preferred? It's actually not conducive to the health of a show, because then you spend more money to either have new fabric milled, which we had to do on the Changeling, and or you have to print fabric, which we've had to do on every show since the pandemic, pre-pandemic, really, for antique stuff. And so, honestly, I am precious, honey. On the Changeling, I went to Joann's, Michael's, and whatever that Toronto version is.
King,
Like
King Textiles. Did you
yes,
go to King
hello. I mean, they expect me on the Handmaid's Tale, but I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm going to find something that we
Yeah.
can order more of, because we're always in this position. I'm not precious. We don't have time. If I were precious, I'd be like, I can't design today. I don't have wool. It's like, no, nobody wants to hear that. So I was the girl going on the Sunday or whatever, my day off, to those places and trying to make something out of nothing. Like, it happens all the time now. We have to learn how to do that.
This is a very important question, though. So in the penultimate episode, that word always cracks me up, by the way. So you created a gold dress for Apollo's mother, but you had, again, probably had multiples. So I looked up Stormy Weather, the movie starring Lena Horne.
Yes.
Now, she doesn't wear that outfit while she's singing Stormy Weather, I believe, but she wears a gold dress in it. Were you kind of inspired by that one, in the one that she wears in the movie, or is this just sort of out of left field here?
Did I look at the film Stormy Weather? Certainly, I looked at the image of Lena Horne. So that dress has many, many fables and fairy tales. One is Lena Horne for real. One is a young Marianne Makiba in the 60s, right? South African, amazing singer. One Sarah Vaughan, and one is Kelly Marcel was like, I really want a gold dress that looks like Marilyn Monroe's in, I forgot which film. And I was
Something
like,
Like It Hot?
I don't know.
Is it the Fuchsia one? Is it the one it's got a bit of a band on it?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I can't remember because I have a terrible short-term memory, but it was all those things. And then we had to make it do many things, right? It had to have its own life as a character in that episode 7. And it had to be on a beautiful drag queen outside as a memory. A beautiful Korean actor from Toronto who was never in drag before. I mean, talk about bold and brave. That kid I love, and it had to be sort of flat and 2-dimensional looking. And that was the story of the drag queen in the closet who passed in that same room. It had to be on elder Lillian as a memory. It had to be on young Lillian as a memory. And it had to be a dream for, I get always emotional talking about it, but it's, patient zero. The inspiration, there were so many beautiful inspirations for that episode. It's my favorite one because it touched on so many personal things. I lost half of my friends to the AIDS pandemic in the early 80s, and in New York City, everybody was in fashion and it was a hard time. And so all of that whole story was really important, but it had to perform for a dying wish for someone dying of AIDS, and it had to be an exterior soul of Lillian, not just young Lillian, not just old Lillian, but a Lillian ancestral through the ages protector with wings to, again, as a kind of outer shell, protect every form of Lillian, through the lifetime that we see at the end. And so, yeah, it went through many, 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 many incarnations, as many that can happen very quickly on a TV show. Mm-hmm. It was very emotional, that whole episode.
Oh, sorry, Anne. It looked like you made, well, I know with the cloak you did you make it out of a mock-up? Did you try different mock-ups of it before cutting it?
I mean, I always want to do something new. So when I first heard Marilyn Monroe was like, like balking against it, Also because Lillian's black, like, would that be the dress in her mind's eye that appeared in a closet? But at the same time, it really worked. It really worked, you know, on both Lillian's and the drag queen prostitute. So it, you know, yes, there were 10,000 drawings and different types of gold fabric because we have to find the sequin. It has to tell all those stories in a one episode moment, right? And so also, you know, it's like a gold dress in and of itself is not a something I would reach for to design, because we've seen a gold dress in many films. I've probably designed a few of them I don't remember, and so I was balking again. I'm like a petulant child creatively, and this is on my own. I don't think anybody ever knew, but I was like, I don't want to do a gold dress, I don't want to do Marilyn Monroe. But you do it, and then you ask the heavens for the mana creatively to do something new. And so I do feel like it was successful for the ghost of the drag queen, for the dying wish of patient zero, for the young and old essence of Lillian, not old Lillian, but just the younger and older, wiser Lillian who was trying to remedy something in her brain. It's really, that dress is a memory and an inspiration on so many levels that it had to literally be a character that was going to perform its own telling of the tale successfully. And I believe that it did okay, you know?
Oh, well, it was stunning. And I love, my favorite moment was when she raises up the wings, like they're kind of like pleated, sort of chiffon, but you have them on. Yeah, it was stunning. I loved it.
Yeah.
How many of those did you have to make? You had
we pleated a lot of fabric overnight, you know, and there was lots of water involved. Like, it was a crazy, listen, TV is a crazy animal that it's almost like a dare in terms of costumes. Like, you know, I dare you to try all these things and to throw all these crazy things at you, and you survive. And I don't know why it was so, I guess it was the patient zero thing. And I mean, look at the two actors. Look at Adina Porter, you know, look at Alexis Louder, look at Jarrett Abramson, and then look at all the people who were playing other characters. They did such an incredible job. It's so intimate and emotional, and so you don't want to get it wrong, and you want to elevate the acting and the work and the story that's being told. And so it's hardcore.
There were so many things going on, and it was sort of like, for instance, I didn't even realize that the cast at the beginning, like the core cast, were playing all of these characters. Like, it took me a while, right? Like, you know, your brain doesn't quite function. It doesn't quite understand what's happening, what's being presented to you. And then at the same time, it's sort of like a theatrical piece, like the curtain has been opened and we're watching a theater piece, like myself being from a theater background. And then also it's a standalone episode too. It had that sort of, it's my favorite episode. For sure. So many things, so many layers going on there, right?
Michael F. Williams, y'all. Let's just shout it out. I mean,
I don't think it's in the book, too. Is that in the? It's not in the book. Okay.
Shout it out, Kelly Marcel.
Yes.
Writing that, and Michael F. Williams. I mean, beautiful. And we were going to do even crazier stuff, honey. We just ran out of time. Like, shooting, like, you could only tell a certain story. Like, the construct is what it is with a TV episode, but.
Yeah, like my brain, like I saw Lillian, I'm like, why does Lillian have blood on her dress?
Oh my
God. What is going on here?
Yeah.
And then at another point, like in some of the stills, like it actually looks pink, right? It's sort of a pinky purple color because of the lighting.
The rain and the water and the dress. And
so
that's what's crazy. Try doing all that before it's shot. Okay. Be fair about what would have happened.
Yeah.
But you know,
and you were like, what? Like, really? Like, really?
Oh, I mean, we just have to say yes, girl. You can't be afraid. You get out your sword and your But it's like, I'm just as proud of that all white outfit on both of them, and that black coat We built it all.
I love the coat. And the one
Love
that
the
sort
coat.
of closes up like that. And so
Why
you
did
made
you love
that?
it? Why did you love it? I want to know.
I love the cut of it. Like I don't know if there's any symbolism in it, but it was very like, it's sort of just it felt very couture, very like vintage, like maybe 1950s or 60s. It had this, I don't know, the way that it was cut. It wasn't like a straight, the grain going that way. There was all kinds of interesting angles happening. And
Glad to hear. I've never asked
yeah.
anybody. So I come from fashion, clearly. I've studied fashion. Imagine a Black woman in the early 80s. I don't know if we should say all this for your readers, but like imagine that on white. So, I mean, like point blank. So you raise the collar so she can have a sense of, you know what I mean? You make it purely 80s in cut because you have to be real. But the ghostly thing, the beautiful thing, I think that fabric came from the Joannes of Toronto.
You're kidding.
No, that's why look, girl, I'm a magician.
Wow.
And I know how to make nothing into something stupendous. And I'm so proud of that coat because it had to tell that story of hiding everything. But most importantly, that fabric looks like a ghost is interwoven in it. Cobwebs are in that black. And why? Because the person she's hiding most from is herself. That's really it.
And also the white is great because then it can be lit all kinds of different colors. So depending on what's happening in the scene. So it's just such a wonderful piece.
Oh, I love that.
Anyway, yeah, you must be so proud of that whole episode. I mean, the whole show, this season's great, but that just absolutely like it's a chef's kiss.
I probably need to watch it again,
yes.
like real as a viewer, but yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So sorry, Mia, I'm just going to wrap it up. So I just want to touch on William first before we wrap it up. And, cause he's just like, he's like a total outlier, right? He's like his own, he's like his own thing. He's his own little island. And, obviously I was like, okay, who is this guy? This guy's kind of like, he reminds me of your typical nerd, he's sort of a little bit clammy, I felt like he might have been padded a bit, like he looked kind of stout and a little bit stocky. And he's wearing one of these like jackets. It sort of reminds me of the jackets that men used to wear in the 80s or 90s kind of thing. Like, I don't know. So what's in his pants? Like,
yeah.
I mean, the actor, I found out later that he's actually a singer, which is so cool.
Yeah.
Nothing like his character at all.
No. I mean, Sam, are actors ever really acting? That's always the hyperbole. But so what's your question?
My question is, okay, I think what my question is we see an evolution of him. Like when we first meet him, we take him at face value, at least I did. But then as the season progresses, the layers are coming off. So we do see a change in him. Like even his hairline changes as the season goes. So what was your sort of approach to his character?
So for William Wheeler, WW, it's interesting because my last name is supposed to be Wheeler, not Crabtree. And I've always wondered, like, what would that look like if I were Anne Wheeler, right? I mean, Anne Crabtree is not even indicative of someone Okinawan. But so William Wheeler is someone that we all know and that we've all seen, but never recognized, or we've always seen, but never noticed because he is unremarkable in every sense, right? And those are the people that I love because let's just call it what it is. They're the fat people that nobody looks at. Okay, I have been overweight as a kid, and now nobody looks at you when you're overweight. So William Wheeler is that guy on the street that no one notices because people feel like they don't have to. He's, oleaginous. He's like his flesh. He's corpulent. You know, it's like there's so much. Like Francis Bacon has probably painted William Wheeler a million times as a piece of meat, right? And so in my mind, I came at William Wheeler as a person who was all one color, a dying piece of meat, like it's turning white. You know, it's been out in the rain. It's never seen sun. And so he became, and honestly, girl, I had like 15, 20 minutes on everybody's lunch hour to come up with a plan. Because in TV land, which is fun, I'm not complaining, because instinct and gut instinct is everything that wins in the end. And it's what we always go back to after we spend all night thinking about something overtly, right? But I literally had no time because casting is always late. Sam is a musician. He was on tour everywhere with Future Islands. And I had an idea of William Wheeler from the novel and from scripts, but, you know, I think what I really wanted was a kind of Kaiser Sose. And I hate to use metaphors and inspiration from other films and TV, but that is one. I don't remember the name of the film, but I love Kaiser Sose. And
Usual Suspects.
yes, I have
Yeah,
utilized.
no, that's a very good description, because
Right?
nobody pays any
Kaiser.
attention to him. They just don't pay any attention to him.
No. He looks ill. He looks ill. He looks like he might cause you extra time, you know, to be involved. And listen, here's the beautiful story of the making of William Wheeler on a lunch hour. Everybody was on their lunch. I had assembled all these clothes, some of them vintage, some of them not. We made a fat pad, my beautiful, and I'm saying that to be honest, full disclosure, because it looks bad in some of the shots, but it's on purpose. Because he's not really that person, is he? We don't know. We'll find out more in the future. But my dearest Kevin, J. Kevin Draves, my supervisor in Manhattan, was like, "Oh, girl, give me some fiberfill. I'll make you a fat pad. I mean, you need it now." I'm like, "I need it now. He's coming." Like nobody knew when he was coming. Sam, and we threw it together on the truck. And that beautiful man, okay, Sam Herring, he just turned into Kaiser Sose William Wheeler. Like he shrunk into this tan man. We called him the Tan Man. And he walked out onto the streets of Fort Washington. We were just laughing about it at Comic-Con, me and Sam, because we said there was this whole audience of like, I don't know, dealers, you know, like comics on the street in Fort Washington, like heckling everybody as they came in and out of all their trailers. And we were like, oh, we're going to get heckled. We're going to get heckled. And that's a good thing. So Sam like morphed into this tan man and went to set, because all of a sudden they had to shoot him like unplanned for a memory. And he walked to set like fucking William Wheeler. Nobody looked at him. Nobody noticed him. He was afraid of his environment. So he shrank into this fat pad and his khaki-ness, and he walked to set, and nobody looked at him. No one heckled him. No one said a word. They knew we were all there, film people. He did his scene, and he came back, and we had the rest of the fitting. It was insane. Like it had to go on screen. And that transformation, forgive me, into kindergarten was, there was this coat and it had meat hooks. It's weird. It's the second time I've used meat hooks. The first was on Handmaid's Tale. But there, you know, I had a sort of Francis Bacon thing with William Wheeler, and the transformation from William Wheeler to kindergarten. Kindergarten is like of, you know, children going missing, and it's all buried into perhaps this, you know, fantasy or real fairy tale from his beginnings. And so the coat he wears as kindergarten, who he transforms into, is like a demon demigod. And that same coat, the importance of the coat is it looks like rotting meat, is what I told Kelly. His coat, it was dark, but you know, it looks like rotting meat that's been out on the street. You don't know if it's brown or bloody or whatever. And there's hooks. And then underneath is this kind of shine, this kind of like, we made everything, girl, because we had to. But it's like, I wanted this kind of like slick flash of a guy on the street who thinks he's something, that's wearing like an Armani two-piece, like, I hate this term, so I'm not going to say it, but like sweatsuit, fancy sweatsuit.
Yeah.
I won't say the fashion term.
No, I know what you mean. Yes.
But I glazed it with the tiniest bit of metallic gold so that you might see that in the light, because we don't know if he's real or your imagination, or is he a dream of William Wheeler's to be stronger? The glasses go, he has hair,
Mhm.
and and that's the transformation.
Yeah.
There's stuff hidden, in that coat as well. Maybe we'll see it someday, Yeah.
Well, that brings me to the big question. Will there be a season 2? Do you even know? And if you do,
No,
are you about to tell me?
know.
You don't know.
knows.
Okay.
Only Mia. No, you know what? We all hope so, because there's still story to be told.
Mhm.
And
Oh, yeah.
it has very much felt like the audience is very excited and wanting to be engaged in the story. It's been such a beautiful surprise, and it was a really hard job to do, just because there's so much to be told, and yet so fulfilling to have you and audiences at Comic-Con, and just hearing tidbits of people who really enjoyed the story or believed it or felt like we were really in Brazil, like one Brazilian journalist, that was the best compliment, or understood the magic of Emma's cloak. Like, all those things equal an experience well done and an experience worth having. And so, yes, we're hoping for a season 2.
By the way, was anyone dressed up when they came to see your panel?
It was it was such a different Comic-Con this time, because the lights are blaring. You can hardly see anything except for silhouettes. And so I only saw like horns.
Oh, okay.
And other things, but no, not that I could see. No.
Well, they'll probably need a little bit of time as well, just to pull it together, because that would have been like I think because it's only been out a few weeks now, I believe.
Yes, in September. Yeah.
So, my final question for you is
question. Okay.
Yes, we're finally there. You sort of alluded to it, but do you have any exciting projects on the horizon?
Well, I had one come out October 6th, and that is called Postcards from Earth. And that is Darren Aronofsky did this mind-blowing new form of filming technology in the desert of Las Vegas. It was helmed by Ralph Winter from Toronto originally, one of your homeboys, and Darren. And so that came to me after the Changeling. And again, I took it because I was terrified, because I cannot swim well, particularly in the ocean. And Darren was like, well, I need you to design 3 or more things that are high stakes sports. So like free diving with a mother whale and baby. It'd have to all work in the deep ocean while they were waiting for any mother whale and baby to show up. Free climbing, which was scaling, it's supposed to be Sedona, the side of a mountain, but it ended up being, I think, Italy. And free ascent, which was ascending the highest point on Earth in the Alps, by Dwayne Field, who is one of the first Black explorers who went to the Antarctic and is teaching kids about it, all in white, futuristic, culminating in a kind of origin story, which perhaps Darren is not well known for, but has had creative stories that are origin stories. A world in the future with a man and woman, also, a white futuristic spacesuit type thing, all things which I have never done. And that was my last project. And it's in Vegas. It's Aronofsky's Postcards from Earth. And the rest of things I'm doing, girl, is learning how to be a good farmer, designing that.
So is Darren's movie, is that out in theaters?
No, it's only at the Vegas Sphere, SPARE. It just opened October.
Oh, okay. So it's like an installation of some kind?
It's showing there, and I haven't seen it.
That's so cool.
I only did it because I am in love with whales, and my last summer in LA was in search of the biggest mammal on Earth, which is the blue whale, which I never saw in real life. But I told Darren I would do it for free, which I didn't do it for free, because of the whales. So